You're all very welcome along to this, our 7th episode of the Right to Change radio podcast. And I want to give a very big, warm Right to Change welcome to my guest this week, Senator Frances Black.
Lovely to talk to you, Dominic, and thanks for inviting me today to the podcast.
Well, it's very definitely my pleasure. And I'd like to talk to you about a few things, as I like to do in these little talks, is to ask questions for people who may not be fully aware of what's going on. Say, for example, now with the situation in Palestine, we've got a ceasefire, and it's in the news, then suddenly it's out of the news. And to ask you really, what is the situation as it stands at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, as you know, there's a ceasefire, and as you can imagine, there were many people killed in the conflict that happened last week and the week before, where Israel were bombing Gaza. And like, a ceasefire is one thing, and thank God there's a ceasefire, and it's great that no more people are being killed. But the actual situation in Gaza at the moment is horrendous. And Dominic, I went out to visit, I was in the West Bank in 2018, and I was very fortunate to get to visit Gaza as well. And what I saw out there was truly, it will stay with me for the rest of my days. And the week I went out there in 2018 was just before the border protest marches that were happening.
Yes.
Where people from Gaza were marching out to the border, and they were protesting, and where I think there was something like 80 people were killed in those protests, in those peaceful protests.
That's right. Yes.
And what I saw out there, I was really shocked what I saw, because when you get into Gaza, you have no idea the deprivation that people are living under. There's over 2 million people living in a place that's half of the size of County Louth. And they're all living on top of each other. They're obviously the roads, the cars, there are cars there, very old buckety cars. The roads are very buckety. But the fact that their water gets cut off, their electricity gets cut off. There's nobody really allowed in and out of Gaza. Their medical care is not good. And then you have a situation where what happened last week, where the hospital was bombed, where orphanages were bombed, and you know, one of the top leading doctors in Gaza was killed along with his family.
That's right. That's right.
And particularly with COVID at the moment. And I actually released a song just over the last week or so, and I was very fortunate to get some footage of Gaza of the last 8 days. And so many people have been left homeless, along with family members being killed. Like, it's just horrendous. It's just horrendous. And then, you know, we look at if we go to the West Bank and the ongoing, the illegal and ongoing annexation that's happening over there, and the illegal seizure of Palestinian lands by the Israeli occupier. And I know we had a motion in the Dáil last week. Thankfully, that was passed.
Yes.
Thankfully, all parties supported it. You know, that was condemning the illegal displacement of Palestinian families and communities from their homes and from their land. And, you know, Ireland, we're lucky that in Ireland we stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, you know, and assert their inalienable right to their homes, and to their land, and to their homeland, and to their right to self-determination, and, you know, and a right that I believe can never be distinguished.
Absolutely, you know? Absolutely.
Extinguished.
But then, like, I mean, from an absolutely practical point of view, that's fantastic. How much of a change is that going to make to the awful things that you've just been describing, that you've seen? How much of a change do you think that might make?
The reason for the motion last week, we are the first country to bring in a motion like this against this annexation. And I have no doubt that the message that sent out internationally, not only to the people of Palestine, who, as we all know, were so appreciative. At last, one of the countries. Now, it's not. I'm not saying it's enough, Dominic. I'm not
Yeah,
saying it's
yeah,
enough,
yeah.
right? This is only the first tiny step. That's all I'm saying. It's the first tiny step of sending out that solidarity to the Palestinian people. So that brings me to speak about the Occupied Territories Bill, which is a bill that I introduced into Shannon Éireann back in 2018, and it passed all stages in the Shannon, and then it was introduced in the Dáil by Fianna Fáil, um, back again in 2018, to go through the Dáil stages. It didn't finally make it, unfortunately. But the
Sadly,
bill,
yeah.
just to say what the bill does, Dominic, the bill seeks to end Irish trade in goods produced in the illegal settlements in the occupied territories. Now, the thing about this bill, and I think it's important just to say this, that we're not just talking about Israeli goods here, we're talking about goods produced in illegal settlements beyond Israel's border in Palestine.
Yeah.
And the settlements, as I said a while ago, these settlements are totally illegal under international law. And as I said, they're actually war crimes. And the UN and the EU and the Irish government keep saying that they're illegal. But despite this, the settlements continue to be built, slowly taking Palestinian land.
They won't
And they
use
are,
the words war crimes, though, will they? They might say, well, it's illegal, and they might kind of say, well, we don't approve,
well,
but
they say, well, what they say is they're breaking international law, which to me is a war crime.
sure.
If you're
Yeah.
breaking international law, then that's a war crime. So, and that's just reality. And what they're doing is they're extracting valuable natural resources and agricultural produce, which are then exported and sold around the world. And I think, Dominic, that there's a clear hypocrisy here. So how can we condemn the settlements as illegal and as theft of land and resources, but then happily buy the proceeds of this crime? I mean, like in the West Bank in Palestine, families are kicked out of their homes.
Yeah.
Like fertile farming land is taken. Imagine, like,
Yeah.
and
Well, just
and the
taken,
fruit and
yes.
vegetables and the fruit and vegetables produced are exported to pay for the occupation. So if we're buying these goods, we're supporting the theft of Palestinian land, and it's 100% wrong. It just is not right.
And
So
when you look back at our own history, maybe, going quite
100%.
a way back, there
Mhm.
is a parallel. And, you would think that maybe this country would be a little bit more sympathetic or a little bit more proactive. But the fact of the
Well,
matter remains,
the people in Ireland
yes,
have, I'm amazed at the support that I get personally because of this bill and the support of this bill, in Ireland. I mean, I am getting like constantly people are emailing me asking me, what can we do, Francis? How can we support? This is a really important bill. Back in the 80s, there was two amazing women in Dunn stores who refused oranges because of the apartheid
that's
situation
right.
in
Yeah,
South
yeah.
Africa. And I believe, and like back then, the same argument that they used then, they're using now. They said it would break EU rules and isolate Ireland internationally, but that didn't happen. We actually stood up for human rights and justice and charted a path for the world to follow. So we can do the same here again. And I really believe it's time for Ireland to show some leadership on this. And for decades we've done nothing but condemn. Condemnation is not enough anymore.
Yeah.
There has to be
There
some
has to be
actual
action. There
consequence.
has to be
There has
actually
to be,
action.
and
Yeah.
consequences. There has to be consequences to what's happening over there and to the behaviour that's happening.
So listen, I was at this point. I was going to ask you: would you have a piece of music that you'd like to share with us, and talk about it for a minute, if you like, and tell us why?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, when you ask me about the music piece, I have to say that always when I'm asked about my favourite piece of music, I have to say it's something from James Taylor from the Mudslide Slim album. Now that album, I received that album on my 15th birthday by a friend of mine who was a boy, but he wasn't a boyfriend. He was about 16. He was my brother's friend. And he gave me this album, Mudslide Slim by James Taylor. And to this day, it was my first ever album that I ever had. And to this day, it's still my all-time favorite album. I think I must have played it to death, and I still listen to it today. And the song that I'd like you to play is a very short song on the album, and it's called Long Ago and Far Away. And it's the first song that I ever sang publicly at that age when I was 15.
Oh,
I sang it for the first time.
Well,
First time at a sing song we had in the house, and that was the first song I sang.
this is as much a pleasure for me as it is for you. So Long Ago and Far Away from the wonderful Mudslide Slim album by James Taylor.
Long ago, a young man sits and plays his waiting game. But things are not the same, it seems, as in such tender dreams. Slowly passing sailing ships and Sunday afternoon, like people on the moon I see, are things not meant to be. Where did those golden rainbows end? Why is this song so sad? Dreaming the dreams I've dreamed, my friend. Loving the love I love to love is just a word I've heard when things are being said. Stories my poor head has told me cannot stand the cold. And in between what might have been and what has come to pass, a misbegotten guess, alas, and bits of broken glass. Where do your golden rainbows end? Why is the song I sing so
Well, that's the marvellous
sad?
James Taylor fading away there into the distance with Long Ago and Far Away. And the first choice of my guest, Francis Black, who's going to tell me now, I hope, a little bit more about other things that you're involved with in the Shannon. Would you like to just elaborate, maybe tell us a little bit? Because I know you're involved with the Good Friday Implementation Committee.
Yeah, I suppose I love being on the Good Friday Implementation Committee, and it's obviously a joint committee, all parties, but we also have parties from the north as well. I know the SDLP, Sinn Féin, the Green Party and the Alliance Party are also allowed to join that committee. And the reason why I suppose I'm very passionate about, my father is an Antrim man for starters. He came from a small island off North Antrim called Rathlin Island. So I would have spent a lot of my childhood, travelling up and down up to Rathlin Island, and particularly during the conflict. And I suppose, I would have seen a lot of, I suppose, the devastation and the impact of the conflict in my travels going up as a child, crossing the border and all of that.
Yeah.
But in 2016, the last term, when I was elected in 2016, later on there was a Brexit committee when Brexit happened, and Brexit committee went up and visited the north, and we got to meet many different people from all communities, all walks of society, from business, from farming communities, who talked about their concerns around Brexit. And out of that, then later on, there was an event that happened called Beyond Brexit in the Waterfront Hall, and there was over 2,000 people at that event. And you could the energy in the room that time was, in general, was people were scared of what was going to happen when Brexit happened, and scared of what was going to happen to their lives. So out of that then grew an organisation called Ireland's Future, where a group of people from civil society came together and asked me to become the chair of the organisation. So these are people from all walks of life who come together to say, look, what's going to happen? And really what Ireland's Future is an organisation that advocates and promotes debate on what, planning and preparing for what New Ireland would look like, and what constitutional change would look like. So what we do really is we hold different events. We engage with different. We're not aligned with any political party, and I really want to make that clear. We're not aligned with any political party. We are just an organisation who wants to work towards planning, preparing for what New Ireland would look like, with everybody included, an all-inclusive island where everybody is included, that we have a really powerful island where we can all, from all different cultures, from all different backgrounds, we can all work together and live together. And I think planning and preparing for that is key, with the aim of maybe a citizens' assembly down the line. So that's what I'm very involved in.
It is very, very important at the moment. I mean, really, when you said there, people are very worried, not just about their livelihoods, but, worried that this fragile piece that has always been a little bit more fragile maybe than we've known, but since Brexit, and particularly since Brexit, because we have the protocol thing and a lot of people are not happy about that, and one community is there, and one community sort of feels like, well, the EU now are using this as a leverage to kind of get at them. It's very important that as many people as possible from all sides of the debate could come together, in
100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what's really, constitutional change has to be on the basis of the consent of the citizens of the island of Ireland, as informed by the Good Friday Agreement. And as I say, Ireland's Future advocate and promote debate and discussion, and that really does include the possibility and viability of new constitutional arrangements on the island, and we have to be guided. Look, Brexit has dramatically changed the social and political dynamic on this island, and Ireland's Future, we have people from civil society from all different backgrounds. We have Trevor Lunn, who is from the unionist background, as is Reverend Karen Sutherman. So we're all an all-inclusive organisation that wants to bring people together and wants to promote and protect human rights, equality, and the fostering of mutual respect. So I think that's really important. So that's why I feel, for me, my work on the Good Friday Agreement is very important. But I'm on the committee. But I'm also the chair of the cross-party Oireachtas mental health committee as well in Leinster House, and that's something again that I'm really passionate about, and the reason why that I'm so, I suppose, passionate about that is because of my work. I'm the founder of a charitable organisation called the Rise Foundation.
The Rise Foundation, yes. And like, God, there's no doubt about it. It's not that these things are all unconnected, because
exactly
with Brexit, with COVID, I mean, really, these are very, very challenging times. There's no other way of putting it. And I mean, even think that's not strong enough, but for so many people, it's very challenging and beyond challenging.
100%, Dominic. And I have to say, that people have been just devastated by COVID, and I'm not even sure if scale of the problem has really shown itself, if you know what I mean. I mean, the scale and the speed and the nature of COVID-19 pandemic is really beyond anything
that we've ever experienced.
Ever experienced in our lifetime. And the mental health issues associated with this pandemic, Dominic, is likely to surpass anything that we've ever previously experienced. And Mental Health Reform are a great organisation. They're an advocacy organisation for mental health in Ireland, and they published research that demonstrates significant public demand for greater action by the government and agencies to respond to the mental health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, there's so many people have been impacted. I mean, you know, I think it's over 50% reported that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative or very negative impact on their mental health and well-being in general. So like,
Yeah.
and this is something that I think we're really going to have to address. And this is from all walks of life. Do you know what I mean?
Well, from all walks of life, and there's a certain, there are different ways it's going to affect different people. You know, some people will say, well, I can't meet people. Other people are struggling desperately financially. Other people who I would know, because I'm a piano teacher, I'm a musician, I know many musicians who are out there, you know, working the live circuit, and you know, there's just a little bit more, a good bit more, sorry, than your week's wages that's disappearing from underneath you. You know, there's that thing that people did on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday. They put a guitar into the boot of the car and they went off and sang, and that's not just all about money. But unfortunately, the money comes into it big time as well. So,
Exactly.
you know, like there's all these different people who lost their jobs. Some people who would have found it desperately challenging to be working from home, for example.
Exactly. And we can't underestimate the impact of that and the isolation in all of that, you know, and even just, you know, the fact when people can't meet people at the weekend, you can't go to somebody's house and hang out with them. I mean, that all has a huge impact, you know.
It has.
And I think there's so much of it. And then you have, you know, the impact on the older generation, the impact on health workers, you know, and what they've come through and the trauma of what they've come through, and families of health workers who every time their loved one went out the door, they were wondering, are they going to come back with COVID? And, you know, I mean,
it was
just
absolutely
so much
terrifying.
fear,
And here we are talking in the past tense. It's still going on
Thank
very
God.
much, you know.
Thank God.
Well, we're talking in the
thank God.
past tense, hopefully, for that level of it, what we had this time last year around the nursing homes and around, you know, people who are health workers. I'm going to ask you, Frances, if you have a second piece of music for us at this stage.
Okay, so this might be a little bit unusual, but I'm a huge fan of Micheál O'Donnell. He was in the Botley band. He was he was in a band called Scara Bray with his two sisters, and it was another guitar player. I can't think of his name, but his two sisters are Trina Ní Dhomhnaill and Mairead Ní Dhomhnaill and Micheál O'Donnell, and they released an album back in 1971, and for me it was one of the best traditional albums that I still listen to it to this day. But there was one song that when I hear Micheál O'Donnell sing it, it just touches my heart. Unfortunately, Micheál O'Donnell was tragically passed away a few years ago. I think he had an accident, and it was just heartbreaking. He was too young, but this song for me still just, it's the way he sings it, and it's the epitome of what Irishness is all about. It's an Irish song, and it's called Casa an Tugan. So Casa an Tugan, and I'd love if you could play that, Dominic.
Well, you know, I most definitely will. So let's take a minute, sit back and relax, and listen to Micheál O'Donnell agus Éag Connacht Casa an Tugan.
Minne mishtlas di waki golere santarne klas jakun nostalene anchniu klas ni fardu ba korle moshkel is viniki ban stigma vart kada chasen san buhi shole Nogar mo kalinja sayon Nogar kasumishjar maroshar Iskragal mochlev Skre chammal mach me kasum tu ganin fe Ma vintu lumilum asnolim mochlev Ma vintu lumilum asnolim Ma vintu
Beautiful song, Micheál O'Donnell, Cossack an Suagan. And I'm talking to Senator Francis Black, and I'd like you to talk a little bit more, just to tell people, I want as many people to be aware of the RISE Foundation and actually what it does, what it's about.
Yeah, the RISE Foundation is an organisation that I set up back in 2009. I had, back in the early 2000s, I'd gone back to college. My mother passed away, Dominic, in 2003, and she left us all a small amount of money. And I had left school when I was, 15. And I always feel she was a little bit disappointed that I left school.
Everybody's mammy wants them to go to college, really, don't they? And,
yeah,
and it's great that it'd be more people could.
Yeah, I don't think she wanted me to go to college. I think it was more she would have liked me to have finished, to do my leaving, but I never did. I hated school, Dominic. I hated it. But anyway,
didn't we all?
So yeah. So anyway, I when she passed away, I said I wanted to kind of, wasn't much money, but I wanted to do something that I suppose she would have been proud of. And I went back to college to study addiction therapy. I'm intrigued by addiction and the impact it has, on the individual, how it can rob people of everything that's good in their lives, their dignity, their respect, their finances, their family, and I wanted to kind of understand it a little bit more, and I went back to study it, and I ended up training in the Rutland Treatment Centre, which is up there in Knockline, and then they kept me on as a locum therapist there. And while I loved the work there, and I loved working with those who are in addiction, I really, my heart went out to the family members when they would come in of a Tuesday to kind of talk to the therapist or talk to the group,
Yes.
that their loved one was in, and kind of, and I just realised that, I remember talking to a few family members who would be so anxious and stressed and worried and almost as lost as the person in addiction, if you know what I mean. And they were almost so anxious and worried that they were almost addicted to the person in addiction.
Yeah.
And I remember watching.
Very, very understandable.
I remember watching a young woman walk out the gate of the Rutland, and her partner was in with alcohol and gambling, and she had two little children with her. And I remember thinking, why does she not have a team of therapists, and why does she not have a group that she could go to, or a program that she could do, because she needs as much support as the person in addiction. So at that time, Stephen Rowan, who was the clinical director of the Rutland at the time, had just retired, and I asked him would he help me set up a charitable organisation that would support family members, that we could bring in and train up therapists just to deal with family members. So RISE is just an organisation. We don't deal with the person in addiction. We only work with the families because I believe that addiction goes to the family like wildfire, and often family members are so stressed and worried and anxious that they can hit a rock bottom just like the person in addiction. So I set up the RISE. We ran programs. We now have a 10-week family program. We have a one-to-one service, and we have an aftercare program. And at the moment, we actually have a waiting list, Dominic. We have 5 therapists who are doing our one-to-ones. We have an online family program now due to COVID, and we have our aftercare, which is online as well. And yeah, it's really, really busy, and more people are coming to us looking for support. And bearing in mind, like it's parents, it's maybe mothers who have young, maybe a young son or daughter who's in addiction. It's partners, whether you have a partner, a
Of
husband, a wife,
course.
whatever.
It impacts
We
on
have,
the entire families, and in
yeah,
actual fact
the whole,
beyond families. But it
yeah,
isn't it amazing, and it's fantastic, I think, that somebody was able to pinpoint this, because it is so obvious when you think about it, and yet there wasn't that support, there wasn't those support networks there to
mm,
give that, that woman walking out the gate with the two children,
yeah.
who is
Well,
just as
I mean,
impacted.
don't get me wrong. I mean, I know the Rutland do give support, but I just felt she needed separate. For me, it's like she was the symbolism of what it's like for family members. There are many, many family members. I mean, she was in a way lucky, I suppose, because she did have support from the Rutland, but there are many, many other family members whose loved one didn't get into recovery, and
Of course, yes.
they're
Yeah.
lost and anxious and worried and stressed and frightened, and they're awash with emotions. They might be angry one minute, they might be grieving the next. And I just felt for those who are still living with somebody who is in active addiction, and to do it in the kindest, gentlest way, and it's not about blaming the person in addiction. It's really important to say that. It's just about giving the family members the tools to be able to cope with it,
With it, yeah.
because addiction is a very insidious, horrendous disease or disorder, or whatever word you want to put on it. It's awful, and it robs the actual disorder or the disease robs the person of everything that's good in their
It
lives,
robs people of
and
their lives
and
and the
families
families, of
and the
course.
family.
Yeah.
So that's just what Rise does. And we're just supporting family members. And as I say, we don't deal with the person in addiction. If somebody comes to us that has a problem, we would refer on to the relevant other organisations that are out there. But we only work with family members. And
Yeah.
as I say, it's come from strength to strength. We don't have any government funding, so we're always trying to try and run events and all that kind of stuff. That can be more
Yeah.
stressful than
Well,
the actual running of the programs.
indeed,
I
and
love
that can,
running the
of course, be
programs.
very, very difficult in the current climate, running
Yeah.
events, well, running
Do you
event
know
or
what?
running anything.
Do you know what was really interesting, Dominic, was that a group of young students from DCU ran an event only last month, and it was like a 24-hour broadcast, television broadcast, and a 24-hour radio broadcast, and all in aid of the Rise Foundation, and they raised €12,000 for Rise.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
that
Yeah.
that will go straight into our services, because we don't have anything else other than services. We
Hmm.
don't really do any advocacy work, or do you know what I mean? And
Yes.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's only one person in the office who does all of the general manager, but then everybody else is therapists. We have 6 therapists, and they're all working really hard. So it's just to pay their wages, and yeah, so it's very, very busy, and I love the work. I love working on the programs. I love the family members. I love meeting with them. I love working with them. And I just love the work. I think it's where, and I know people say, Francis, is your music not everything? And I love my music as well. But for me, the work that I do with the Rise Foundation, it's like when I started to do that work, it's like, that song, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. When I started to work in the Rise Foundation, it was like, this is it. This is what I was meant to do in my life. This is what I feel most comfortable doing. And because you're guiding people, you're helping people to deal with trauma, I suppose, and you're giving them the tools to be able to cope, and that
And
feels
making
right
a
to me.
huge difference in people's lives, which is,
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
think that's more important than any job you'll
yeah,
ever do, whether it be on a stage or anywhere else. It
yeah,
really is, and it's
yeah.
fantastic. Francis, I'm going to ask you, have you a third piece of music for us?
I do, and it has to be Neil Young, for me. This is all showing my age, really, but Neil
It's
Young
great because
again.
I'm getting all these from my CD
Is this
collection.
is this
I've
all
almost
your
as
era? Is that
almost as big a collection as RTE, actually. Really.
it? I'm going to pick something from after the gold rush, and there's so many of them. I think probably Tell Me Why is probably one of my favourite songs from After the Gold Rush, but I'm not going to ask you to play that. I'm going to ask you to play Don't Let It Bring You Down.
Old man lying by the side of the road with the lorries rolling by. Blue moon sinking from the weight of the load and the buildings scrape the sky. Cold wind ripping down the alley at dawn and the morning paper fly. Dead man lying by the side of the road with the daylight in his eyes. Don't let it bring you down. It's only castles burning. Find someone who's turning, and you will come around. Blind man running through the light of the night with an answer in his hand. Come on down to the river of sight and you can really understand. Red lights flashing through the window in the rain and you hear the sirens moan. White cane lying in a gutter in the lane. If you're walking home alone, don't let it bring you down. It's only castles burning. Find someone who's turning, and you will come around. Don't let it bring you down. It's only castles burning. Just find someone who's turning, and you will come around.
Frances, I'm going to say to you thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a pleasure and an inspiration.
Oh, thanks very much, Dominic. Janie Mac. No, I really enjoyed talking to you. You made it very easy for me, Dominic. Thanks so much. And
We'll speak again, I hope, soon. And thank you very much.
all the best. Long fall.